So if you're trying to figure out which type of birds to raise on a poultry farm, this is the only video that you want to watch. I've raised all three types of birds between broilers, layers, and dual-purpose birds. I know their numbers, and I'm going to be giving you my honest verdict. And by the end of this video, I can promise that you're going to be very surprised. And it's not most likely what you're thinking about. So stick around right through to the very end. So first, we shall go through the different types of birds that can be kept on the farm. We'll start with the layers. Now, layers are birds that are kept for eggs, as you can see. So on this farm of mine, the birds that I do have are layers. And I currently do have about 17,000 layers on the farm. These can be kept usually for anything between 72 and 105, 110, even up to 120 weeks. I just offlaid the flock. In fact, the farthest house you look at right there, I offlaid that flock, and that flock was at 104 weeks old. And the main reason I offlaid it was not really because it stopped being profitable, but because I have another batch coming in and I need to prepare that house. And it's not as productive as perfect, but it was still performing quite well. But I had to offlay for that reason. So they are kept for a really long time, and they offer you a bit of consistency. So they give you consistency, cash flow. You have a bit of certainty of how things are going to be going, but they also do require a bit of discipline and waiting. You need to wait at least 5-6 months before you get your money back, but the money is cumulative. You don't get all your money at once. That is layers. When it does come to broilers, I personally have kept broilers before in the past in huge quantities. Currently, I don't do them, but I also do work with a lot of farmers who raise broilers at the moment. And broilers are kept for a really short time. These are birds that are raised for the purpose of production of meat. They can be kept for anything between 4 to 8 weeks, usually. In Uganda on the market, people do 4 weeks a lot currently, but you can even keep them up to 8 weeks. The thing with broilers is that you do very many cycles. They do require a lot of discipline for you to maintain the cycle, but they are quite easy for, some people to start with. So the way they are done is that, it's a little bit different because the cycles are much quicker, and the way you have to deal with the market is quite different because they offer a little bit of fluctuations, not as much consistency as it is with the layers. And when it does come to the dual-purpose birds, these are a bit of a hybrid of both. So dual-purpose birds can give you both eggs or meat. You can raise them in a dual-purpose style where, you optimize them to give you both eggs and meat. But if you do that, you won't do it as well. So usually most farmers, what they do is that they either optimize them for meat or optimize them for eggs. And that means giving them a bit of different types of rations. But the thing with them is that they're a bit more disease resistant. They can be kept in a place which is a bit more lax. And actually, when it does come to sell value, or how much money you can sell per bird, or how much money you can sell per egg, usually you get more money per bird or per egg from the dual-purpose birds compared to either layers or broilers. So that's the brief difference between the three different types. So the first comparison is going to be with the cost of starting to raise the birds. When it does come to layers, you have the highest startup cost amongst all of them. It's because you're going to literally front load all your costs. So, for example, you need to build a chicken house, which has to be quite a good and strong chicken house so that it can last you a long time. Broilers and dual-purpose birds, don't need to last 100 weeks, yeah? With dual-purpose birds, how long they last really depends on you, yeah? You can keep them for 12 weeks, which is 3 months, if you want to sell them for meat. You can keep them for much longer if you want to sell them for or produce eggs, but you won't keep them for 2 years if you want to produce eggs like I do right here, yeah? So that means that with the layers, you want to build a much stronger, durable structures. You also have way more costs and money that you're going to invest into the farm. Things like egg-laying boxes that you're not going to be investing in broilers, yeah? Things like way more vaccines. For example, the fall typhoid vaccine, fall pox vaccines, actually 2 fall typhoid vaccines, at least for me in my country. So all those are costs that you would never have to do for broilers, things like debeaking, all those different costs. So you're going to have way more money up front, because also do remember that you're going to keep these birds for up to 5 months. Depending on how well you raise them. 18 weeks before you get a single egg out of them. So you're going to require a lot more startup capital. When it does come to the broilers though, with broilers, you don't need as much startup capital compared to the layers, because the batches are kept for a much shorter time. Yeah, so you only need to have feed available for 4 to 8 weeks, depending on how long you're going to be selling them Unlike, 18, in fact, not even 18, 21 weeks for the layers, because 18 weeks is when the birds start to lay, but it's until the 21st week that the birds are laying enough for them to feed themselves. Yeah. So that's how long you're going to be keeping them. So again, with the broilers, your costs are much smaller. The feed, you're not going to have to pay for very many vaccines. You're not going to have to build laying boxes. So you can start with much lower amounts of money. When it does come to the dual purpose birds, it's also not as high because, first of all, depending on how you're going to be keeping them, you can free range them or partially free range them, and that significantly reduces on your cost, because that means that you can even build a much smaller house, keep them there a bit more intensely, and then, they're just going to stay there for the night. You can even stock them up to 10, 12, 13 birds per square meter. Unlike with layers where you do 6 birds per square meter. And then during the day, you let them out in a controlled area, maybe with a fence, free range them, give them their feed inside there. In the evening, they go back inside the house. So the house doesn't need to be as big as the house when it does come to the layers. Yeah. And so because of that, the cost comes down, but also feeding them is much easier. Yeah. Because you can feed them on locally available materials. You can feed them on kitchen scraps, leftover food. I have a lot of alfalfa that I grow here on my food. I can give them alfalfa. So you can feed them on things that are available to you, and they would work very nicely and beautifully for the birds. So it's even much cheaper to start raising dual purpose birds. So when it does come to the cost, the layers have the much higher cost. Now, the other thing we're going to talk about is the feeding amount and how that directly correlates with the cost. Now, this is quite different from just talking about the feeding cost, because when it does come to feeding amounts, the most intensive feeders amongst all of them are broilers, actually, because broilers can eat up to 180 grams per bird per day. The maximum a layer will eat is about 125 grams per bird per day when it's way more mature. Broilers are going to eat way more than that. So when it does come to intensity, especially if you're planning on your cash flows, yeah. For example, if you don't have a lot of money up front at the beginning and you're planning on cash flow and you're just relying on cash flow, maybe you're earning a salary or something like that, you might be surprised that it might be much easier for you to do layers compared to the broilers. Because if you're going to be raising, for example, 1,000 layers and 1,000 broilers, 1,000 broilers eat way more food compared to 1,000 layers, because they need to put on a lot of weight and grow big really quickly. Each bird is going to consume way more food. Yeah. Now, of course, the advantage to that is that in a short time, they're going to reach their target weight and you're going to sell them and get money back. But in terms of just absolutely eating, the broilers are the heaviest feeders. So you need to make sure that you plan for the fact that they're going to eat a lot of feed during that short time that you're going to be keeping them. And that directly correlates to a very high feed cost. Now, when it does come to layers, they are a bit more moderate when it does come to the feed. Like I've told you, they can eat up to 125 grams per bird per day. And you need to control how you feed them. Yeah, because you can also get into the trap of overfeeding them. Because usually what happens when you're raising layers is that we have time which we call time for empty feeders. Yeah. Now, if you get into the trap of saying, okay, I have a lot of money, let me just give them the feed. If layers become too fat and too big, they will not lay for you eggs. So you want to make sure that you control their feeding to ensure that they have the correct weight to give you eggs. When it does come to the dual purpose birds, these have the lowest intensity of feeding. Now, in terms of actually eating, they eat way more than the layers, but because their food can be divided up, yeah, so you can give them, the commercial feed, and then you can also give them, waste food, banana peelings, chop them into small bits, yam cuttings, some types of pastures and grasses. That significantly brings your cost of feed down. So they're actually the easiest ones to look after. The next bit is the management. So when it does come to managing the birds day to day, interestingly, broilers are the most intricate or complicated when it does come to the management in terms of day-to-day management. Because with broilers, you need to do daily weighing, unlike layers for which you have to do weekly weighing. With broilers, you have to literally manage your litter way more intensively because they produce, their litter or their droppings are way more liquid. So you need to manage their litter way more intensely compared to the layers. With broilers, you also need to manage the feeding way more intricately, because remember, our goal is to get to the weight within 4 weeks, 5-6 weeks. So you're consistently making sure feed is available, consistently making sure the water is available. With broilers, if you don't give them good feed for one day, the next day you're going to suffer. You're not going to get the right weight that you expect to be getting. Yet for layers, if you're not consistent for 2-3 days, they can forgive you. They can forgive you because they have a long time for you to try and get the results over that cycle. You could get away with 2 or 3 days of doing blunders. But with broilers, 2 or 3 days of doing blunders could significantly reduce your profit to zero. Yeah. So just 1 day could be very, very complicated for you. So when it does come to, the actual day-to-day management, it's actually way more complicated, or, requires way more attention to manage the broilers compared to the layers. However, in terms of the technicalities and the number of things that you have to do, there's actually way more to do with the layers compared to the broilers. So what I can say is that broilers are very intense, very, very intense. Layers are not intense, but they require consistency with doing a lot of things. Yeah. So your work won't be as intense as it would be in the broilers, but you have quite a number of things to do. For example, you have to deal with laying boxes and understand how to make laying boxes and how to build the proper laying boxes. You have to deal with understanding how to give a fall typhoid vaccine, a fall pox vaccine, which are not given in broilers. You also have to understand, the repercussions of weight measurement, things like lighting, and how those play a role in the production of the eggs. Yeah. So I would say, again, broilers are intense. Layers are more intricate when it does come to the management. Now, when it does come to the dual purpose birds, these are actually the easiest, yeah, because they are naturally a bit more hardy compared to these two. They can survive with a bit less care and less attention, so they can accept you to free range them, and you won't get as terrible results, or probably high mortalities, or they won't punish you with the weight gain even if you do decide to free range them. So you won't get a lot of issues like diseases and things like that. So they are the easiest ones to manage when it does come to the 3 types of birds. Now, the management can actually be quite complicated, like I've said, for both the layers and the broilers, and in fact, even the dual purpose birds. And sometimes it comes very easily for me because I've done it for a lot of years and I know exactly what to do and I have a grasp of it on my hands. But for a lot of people, they have a lot of variations. And one flock, for example, broilers, they'll do it really well. The next one do it really terribly. You'll have someone with, let's say, 2 flocks of layers, like you can see my 2 houses right here. And this one will perform really well and the other one really terribly. It's just because they don't understand the management principles and the consistency. And that is why it is very, very important for you that you understand exactly how to do that. And that's why the Farm Up Academy comes in. Yeah, if you want to understand how to start and raise birds effectively and raise them really well, link in the description for you to join the Farm Up Academy. Now, the next bit that I'm going to be talking about is the profit. Which one of them actually makes the most money? Now, first, I'm going to first tell you how each one of them actually makes money. We'll start with the broilers. When it does come to broilers, you're going to have short cycles. So you get your money, usually upfront, buy feeds, buy the birds, buy everything, raise the birds, and in 4 to 6 weeks, you're going to be selling off your birds. In fact, maybe up to 8 weeks, you're going to be selling off the birds and getting back all your money in one go. Yeah, intense for a very short time and get back your money. Quite intense, a lot of effort, and you need to make sure that you've grasped it to the dot. So you buy the feed at the correct cost, raise the birds properly so that they put on the correct weight, make sure that they don't get disease, because interestingly, among the 3 different types, the broilers have the easiest predisposition to dying. Yeah, they can die due to anything. They die really due to anything. So make sure that they're not dying, feed them well, ensure that your feed cost is really low. They're going to gain weight, sell them off really quickly. So quite a quick business model. Now, when it does come to the profitability of broilers, it's usually about 10%. On average, about 10% of your revenue. Yeah, if you do it really well, it's going to be about 10%. Now, when it does come to layers, you're going to keep your birds and keep them for a long, long time. You're going to keep them until the 18th week. That's when they'll give you an egg. 21st week, that's when they'll start feeding themselves. And it will be much later on, maybe in the 50th, 60th, 70th week, that you break even in terms of how much money you put into the flock, if you include, the structure and things like that. And then after that, it's going to be profit. Yeah. Now, if you want consistency, and you want a bit of consistency in your cash flow and how the money comes in, then broilers are not as good as layers. Yeah. Because with the layers, there is this consistency. I'm producing my eggs every day. I can sell them on the market every day. The price fluctuations are much lower for layers compared to broilers, because as you can understand, because the cost of starting the farm is much higher, less people do them, but also because broilers have a very short cycle. With every cycle offers a chance for price fluctuations, literally every cycle. Yeah. So because of that, prices are much more consistent when it does come to layers, but they vary a bit more when it does come to broilers. But you also need to make sure that you understand your layer farm very well. If you don't do it well, you can actually end up in terrible losses and much more losses than broilers. Why am I saying this? Because with broilers, if you get a flock wrong, you've gotten just one flock wrong, and you can recover on the next one. Maybe you might break even, or maybe suffer a small loss, get a little bit more money, invest into the next flock, and you're hitting it big. With layers, if you make a terrible mistake, for example, don't vaccinate against fall typhoid, or you get someone who has supplied you birds that are not vaccinated against, Merrick's disease. What's going to happen is that flock is going to be sickly. You reach the 18th week, you don't have an egg, you probably get your first egg in the 23rd week, and they're going to give you few eggs the entire cycle. You're going to be very frustrated for a very long time. So you need to be very certain that what you're doing is really well or really good. So when it does come to dual purpose birds, these are the most interesting, because again, like I said, you could choose to do them for eggs, you could choose to do them for meat. And if you do them for meat, usually you can sell them after 3 months, 2.5 to 3 months. You can start selling them and sell them much later. If you're doing them for eggs, usually it's going to take you the same time as layers for them to start laying. So 18 weeks, 21 weeks for them to be, laying enough for them to sustain themselves. But the interesting bit is, with dual purpose birds, the price of the bird is much higher in terms of price per bird. And the price of the eggs is also much higher in terms of price per egg, in terms of the price of a tray of an egg. The price of the tray of a dual purpose bird is much higher than the price of a tray of a commercial layer. But where they even out a little bit is that with the layers, for example, they can give me up to 96% in egg production and for a sustained time. Dual purpose birds, they can give you high percentages, but not for so long. I mean, their production is going to vary a little bit more. They won't give you as many eggs as the layers. And so that's why it's going to even out a little bit. Yeah. So then, what is my advice, and who would I advise to start with what? First, broilers. I would advise someone to start with broilers if you're limited on capital, because you don't need as much money, heads up, compared to like layers to start the farm. So you're a bit limited on capital. Or if you want quick cycles, so quick return on your investment, you probably have something that you need to do and you need money really quickly. You have some money, but you want to grow it and you need it really quickly. Invest it in the broiler farm. In 4 to 8 weeks, you're going to have your money back, and then you can use the profit to do something or, whatsoever. The goal is that you want to have these quick returns, but you must be ready for the intensity of managing the birds. Like I've shared with you, you need to be able to understand how to manage the birds because they are quite intense. And then the other thing is that you must have the discipline to reinvest the money back into the birds. After 4 weeks or 6 weeks, after you've sold off the birds, you need to make sure that you have the discipline to bring in another flock. Don't wait 2 months or 3 months before you bring in another flock, because you're going to use that money and then you're going to be out of business. So my advice is, you must be disciplined enough to understand that after a flock is out, I'm going to reinvest it into the flock. That's the kind of person I would advise to start with broilers. Someone who wants to invest in layers, someone who wants a bit more consistency. Yeah. So you probably have a bit more money available to you. You want the consistency of, I'm going to have money coming in every day for a much sustained and longer time. But you are also very willing to wait 18 weeks, 5 months sometimes for your very first egg, and up to 21 weeks before the farm actually becomes profitable, or before the farm or the birds can feed themselves. That is the kind of person I would advise, to go for layers. You're more willing to grow slowly and, more interested in long-term growth. So you'll be like, okay, I'll do the flock for 2 years and then after that I'll get bigger, something like that. That's the person I would advise to do the layers. Now, the person I would advise to do the dual purpose birds is someone who probably has less capital, little capital to start the farm, and more probably in a rural setting. So you want something that's a bit more forgiving when it does come to look after. Yeah. So you're probably still a beginner and you don't know which one to go with, but you really have no idea how to raise chickens. You want something that's easier to look after. You're probably too busy. You're never around at the farm, and you're in a rural area where you can, let the birds to forage, or you can give them scraps and things available in addition to the feed that you might be giving them. Then the dual purpose birds is what I would be advising for you. So personally, I decided to focus on layers despite doing all those others, because I'm in the second category of the people. Yeah, and I clearly match the second category of people. But any of you guys could actually do this, and it could do really, really well from you. So I would love to know, let me know in the comment section below, which of the 3 different types are you actually going to start with? Yeah, and why? Let me know. I would love to see the debate in the comment section below. I'm quite curious. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, smash the notification bell. Catch you very soon with another one. Lots of love. Bye-bye.